Over the past few months, a wave of recalls marked "Park Outside" has been rolling in. The Toyota Camry, America's best-selling sedan, was recalled over a fire risk linked to the hybrid inverter. BMW issued 2 separate fire-related recalls within the span of a single month. The Ford Ranger, more than 140,000 vehicles affected, had warning notices sent out just last week. The Volkswagen Jetta, fires with no warning at all. The Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Ioniq 9, a bolt defect the supplier initially tried to cover up before eventually admitting it. And there's one thing tying all of these stories together. The number of recalls in 2026 is on track to break records. Ford already set a historic record in 2025 with 153 recalls, nearly double the previous all-time high. In 2026, the pace is even faster. Today, new cars, new fires, new facts. Ford Ranger, fire right above your head. Letters to owners started going out on April 27, 2026, literally just days ago. Here's what happened. Ranger models from 2024 through 2026, built at Ford's Michigan plant between December 2022 and December 2025. On the assembly line, the wiring harness near the sun visor or beneath the headliner was either routed incorrectly or wrapped too tightly with electrical tape. As a result, it rubbed against the metal body frame. Over time, that slowly wore through the wire insulation. Slowly, over years. The result, an electrical short circuit. The potential ignition point, the A-pillar, the structural column between the windshield and the front door. Exactly where you're sitting. The most important part, warning signs may appear beforehand. A blown fuse, for example, or an electrical contact shorting out. But they also might not appear at all. The NHTSA publicly advised owners to park their vehicles outside and away from buildings. The standard wording used for defects considered highly serious. Ford notified dealers on April 17th. Interim letters to owners began going out at the end of April. Full repair instructions won't be mailed until August 2026. In other words, from the moment Ford became aware of the issue to the moment the owner receives instructions on how to fix it, months will have passed. During all that time, owners are being officially told to park outside. The repair will be free of charge at any Ford or Lincoln dealership. Toyota Camry Hybrid and Corolla Cross Hybrid, the loose bolt that nearly put America's most popular sedan at risk. The Toyota Camry was the best-selling passenger car in the United States in March and throughout the first quarter of 2026. Quite literally the country's top-selling vehicle right now. And then, in December 2025, Toyota recalled 55,000 hybrid Camrys and Corolla Cross models over a potential fire risk while driving. The issue: a bolt inside the inverter within the hybrid powertrain may not have been tightened to the proper specification by the supplier, Denso Manufacturing, Tennessee. If the bolt loosens and falls inside the inverter, it can create an open circuit. That triggers a warning alert and may cause the vehicle to enter fail-safe mode or lose propulsion completely. But the bigger concern is this: if the bolt is loose while the ignition is on, it can also create a short circuit that generates enough heat to damage surrounding components and potentially start a fire. Toyota specifically warned that losing propulsion at highway speeds creates a critical safety situation. You lose control precisely when you need it most. Toyota stated that only around 1% of the 55,000 recalled vehicles are actually believed to contain the defect. At first glance, that sounds reassuring until you do the math. 1% of 55,000 is 550 vehicles, 550 Toyota Camrys potentially driving on American roads right now with a defective inverter bolt and a possible risk of fire or sudden loss of power. Owner notifications began going out in February 2026. Repairs will be performed free of charge once Toyota finalizes the repair procedure. Why this matters to you: if you own a Camry Hybrid or Corolla Cross Hybrid built between August and November 2025, check your VIN on nhtsa.gov right now. BMW, 2 fire-related recalls in a single month. The first issue involved the starter relay. Here's how the failure developed. Abrasive wear inside the relay gradually produced metallic debris, which accumulated in the relay's electrical chamber. That contamination could cause the starter motor to overheat and, in extreme cases, lead to a fire. The situation was considered serious enough that BMW issued a park outside recommendation, an official instruction advising owners to park away from buildings. The problem first surfaced in September 2025, when several vehicles were found with thermal damage to their starters, although the root cause was still unknown at the time. By January 2026, the investigation identified metallic debris inside the relay chamber. That finally explained the chain reaction, wear leading to overheating, and overheating creating a potential fire hazard. Globally, the recall affected roughly 575,000 BMW vehicles worldwide. Owner notification letters were scheduled to be mailed on March 24, 2026. Starter replacements are being performed free of charge through BMW dealerships. The second recall involved the air conditioning system wiring. Scope: 58,713 vehicles. Affected models included the 5 Series, 7 Series, i5, i7, and M5, essentially BMW's flagship and most expensive vehicles. The cause was almost absurdly mundane. The air conditioning wiring harness was positioned in a way that made it vulnerable during a routine cabin air filter replacement. Not during a collision, not under extreme operating conditions, during a standard air filter service, a maintenance procedure typically performed every 20,000 miles at an ordinary service appointment. If the wiring gets damaged, it can trigger a short circuit and create a fire risk. BMW itself described the issue as a component placement problem rather than a manufacturing defect. In other words, the wiring was simply routed through an area where technicians could accidentally damage it during normal maintenance. For owners of 5 Series, 7 Series, i5, and i7 models, if your cabin air filter has been replaced at any point over the last few years, it's worth having the wiring inspected. Volkswagen Jetta, fire with no warning. 48,165 vehicles in the United States, plus another 13,318 in Canada. This is one of the most disturbing recalls on our list, not because the scale is massive. It isn't. 48,000 vehicles is relatively limited by industry standards. What makes it alarming is something else entirely. In the official NHTSA documents, the field labeled warning identification simply says none. Here's what happened. At Volkswagen's plant in Mexico, a worker was supposed to connect the transmission ground wire to the left side body pillar. On some vehicles, that step was never completed. A simple human error. The grounding wire was left disconnected. Without that grounding connection, an open electrical circuit forms through the oil pressure sensor module. The module then begins drawing excessive current. The wiring overheats and melts. Eventually, a fire can break out inside the engine compartment, and this wasn't just a hypothetical risk. By the time the recall was announced, Volkswagen had already confirmed 6 real-world incidents across the United States and Canada, 3 cases involving melted wiring and 3 actual engine bay fires. No injuries have been reported so far. Volkswagen updated the manufacturing process on February 17, 2026, but owner notification letters will not be mailed until May 8, 2026. That means nearly 3 months passed between the moment Volkswagen knew about actual fires and the moment owners would officially be informed. The repair is straightforward. Dealers will inspect the grounding wire and replace components if necessary, free of charge. If you own a Jetta built before February 2026, don't wait for the letter. Check your VIN now. Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Ioniq 9, the story of a concealed defect, 27 vehicles. Compared to the other recalls, the number seems almost insignificant, but behind this case is a pattern that matters far beyond those 27 cars. Here's what happened. In November 2025, Mobis North America Electrified, Hyundai's own battery system subsidiary, discovered that one battery system unit had failed an automated quality inspection. An internal investigation began. The result: the bus bar mounting bolts inside the high-voltage battery system had not been tightened to the required specification. Loose bolts lead to unstable electrical contact. Unstable contact creates electrical arcing. Electrical arcing creates a potential fire risk, but the more revealing part came afterward. Investigators found that some of the defective battery units had already been reworked directly at the supplier's facility and reworked incorrectly. In other words, Mobis knew about the defect, attempted to fix it internally without escalating the issue, failed to correct it properly, and only afterward informed Hyundai. Hyundai compiled a list of potentially affected VINs in December, and the official recall decision was made in January 2026. All 27 affected vehicles, Ioniq 5 and Ioniq 9 models built at Hyundai Motor Group Metaplant America in Georgia, were produced between January and September 2025. Why does this matter beyond just 27 vehicles? Because it reveals how modern manufacturing chains actually operate. A supplier discovers a defect, attempts a quiet on-site correction. The fix doesn't work. The vehicles still reach customers, and only later does the supplier notify the automaker. How many defects are quietly corrected successfully behind the scenes we'll probably never know. The ones that fail become recalls. Lexus LX600. When a $100,000 SUV starts leaking transmission fluid. The LX600 is Toyota's flagship luxury SUV, starting price around $100,000. This is the kind of vehicle people buy expecting absolute reliability and top-tier engineering. The problem: a software malfunction under certain operating conditions can allow the transmission to damage itself internally. That can lead to a sudden loss of propulsion at highway speeds, creating a serious crash risk. It can also cause transmission fluid to leak, and transmission fluid coming into contact with hot engine components becomes a potential ignition source, a fire risk in a $100,000 vehicle. The fix is relatively simple. Dealers will install updated transmission control software free of charge. Owner notification letters were expected to be mailed at the end of April 2026. If you own a 2025 or 2026 LX600, don't put this one off. The repair itself may be straightforward, but it's not something worth ignoring. Ford, the undisputed recall leader of 2026. 2026. We already covered the Ford Ranger, but the Ranger is only one chapter in the much larger story unfolding around Ford in 2026. Let's start with the numbers. In 2025, Ford issued 153 recalls, an all-time record in the history of the American auto industry, nearly double the previous record of 77 recalls held by General Motors since 2014. As of early May 2026, Ford had already issued 34 recalls during the year, almost 3 times more than its closest competitor. During the first 3 months of 2026 alone, the number of affected vehicles exceeded 9.5 million units. This is no longer just a lot of recalls. It's a systemic story. Among Ford's 2026 recalls involving potential fire risks, Ford Maverick and Bronco Sport, the engine block heater can overheat if left plugged in. Owners were advised not to use the heater until repairs are completed. The issue echoes a similar recall involving Ford and Lincoln vehicles discussed previously, although these are different models from a more recent production cycle. Ford Explorer, Mustang, Lincoln Corsair, and Maverick improperly manufactured cylinder heads. Oil gallery plugs can dislodge under oil pressure. Oil leaks combined with hot engine components create a potential fire hazard. One especially interesting detail: at the time the recall was announced, all 6 affected vehicles were still sitting on dealer lots and had not yet reached customers, a rare case where the recall intercepted the problem before retail delivery. Ford Focus and Explorer. The engine block heater may cause a short circuit and potentially lead to a fire. Similar underlying mechanics to the issue previously seen in Lincoln models, though involving different vehicles and production years. So why is Ford issuing so many recalls? Industry analysts point to several explanations. First, Ford has become significantly more aggressive about proactively identifying defects after the NHTSA fined the company in late 2024 for failing to meet notification deadlines related to earlier recalls. Second, modern vehicles have become objectively more complex. The sheer number of interconnected electronic, hybrid, and software-controlled systems has dramatically increased the number of possible failure points. Third, many of the current problems trace back to the rapid rollout of multiple new platforms between 2021 and 2023, when Ford rushed to launch the Maverick, Bronco, the redesigned F-150, and the electric F-150 simultaneously. Look at everything we covered today alongside the cases from the previous video: Jeep, Volvo, Mercedes, Subaru, Toyota Camry, BMW, Volkswagen Jetta, Hyundai Ioniq, Lexus LX, Ford Ranger. This is not a list of unreliable brands. This is the entire market. And here's what connects most of these stories. First, the infamous loose bolt. Toyota Camry, a bolt inside the inverter. Hyundai Ioniq, bus bar mounting bolts inside the battery system. In both cases, improperly tightened fasteners during production. Modern vehicle manufacturing is an assembly line process involving thousands of operations and hundreds of suppliers. One improperly torqued bolt on the production line, and suddenly 55,000 vehicles end up in a recall. Quality control is not just a technology issue, it's also a production speed issue. The faster the assembly line moves, the greater the chance that a critical step gets missed. Second, wiring that was never given a safe place to exist. BMW 5 Series and 7 Series, Volkswagen Jetta, Ford Ranger. In every case, either the wiring was routed incorrectly during assembly, or it was designed in a location where routine service could damage it. That points to problems in either manufacturing discipline or engineering design. Third, the absence of warning signs. This is the most disturbing pattern of all. Volkswagen Jetta, none listed in the warning identification field. BMW starter issue. The vehicle may show symptoms such as a no-start condition, or it may simply catch fire without warning. Jeep Grand Cherokee, no indication at all before thermal runaway begins. When an automaker writes no warning signs in an official NHTSA document, it means there may be nothing you can do before it becomes too late, unless you proactively check your VIN beforehand. Fourth, the delay between discovery and notification. Volkswagen knew about actual engine fires, yet owner letters went out nearly 3 months later. Toyota announced its recall in December, while owners began receiving notifications in February. Ford Ranger, recall announced in April, but full repair instructions not expected until August. That is the industrial reality. The gap between the moment a company becomes aware of a problem and the moment you hear about it can stretch for months. During just the first 4 months of 2026, dozens of fire-related recalls have already been issued, and the pace is not slowing down. The next video will come when the next major wave of data arrives. If you've personally dealt with any of these recalls, share your experience in the comments, subscribe, and check your VIN today. It takes less than 30 seconds.